The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp, born on October 20th, 1958, in Delwood, Missouri, was the second child in the Newman family. She later married Mark Hupp, and the couple had 2 children. In 2001, they relocated to Fallon, Missouri. Pam held several jobs over the years, including working as a life insurance administrator at State Farm until 2010, when she left the position after filing disability claims for chronic leg and back pain. Although she had a minor criminal record, including 2 forgery charges, those who knew her never imagined she might be capable of violence. That perception changed on August 16, 2016, when Pam shot and killed Louis Gumpenberger, a man with significant physical and cognitive impairments resulting from a car accident in 2005. Pam claimed that Louis attacked her with a knife after jumping out of a passing vehicle, and that she defended herself by knocking the knife away and then shooting him 5 times with her Ruger LCR, which she said she had taken from her nightstand. However, her story appears suspicious, and the true events of that day remain uncertain. Pam also alleged that Louis told her to drive him to the bank to withdraw money belonging to Russ Faria, a man who had been wrongfully convicted of killing his wife Betsy in 2011. According to Pam, Louis grew agitated and exclaimed, "We're going to the bank. We're getting Russ money." Later evidence, though, showed that Louis's actual plan was to have Louis Gumpenberger attack and kill Pam. A handwritten note discovered at the crime scene outlined a set of instructions for Gumpenberger. He was allegedly directed to first retrieve Russ money from Pam's apartment, then kill Pam and stage the scene to make it appear as though Russ' wife was responsible. The note contained disturbing specifics, including a directive to leave the knife protruding from Pam's neck. The person behind the plan promised Gumpenberger a substantial payment for carrying out the crime. Pam Hupp was ultimately arrested for the murder of Louis Gumpenberger. Yet a critical question emerged. Was Gumpenberger truly a hired assassin, or had Pam manipulated him, exploiting a mentally disabled man as a pawn? The truth began to surface when Pam voluntarily went to the O'Fallon Police Department. During her interview, she asked whether the session would be recorded, noting that she was typically accompanied by Chris Hayes, a reporter from KTVI. She even accused Hayes of drawing criminals toward her through his reporting. Pam also had a history of impersonating Kathy, a producer for an NBC television show. According to the O'Fallon police chief and the St. Charles County prosecutor, Pam used this fake identity to lure Gumpenberger into her home, where she convinced him to reenact a 911 call, providing her with a cover story for the violent crime she was about to commit. After killing Gumpenberger, Pam Hupp staged evidence to implicate him, including a handwritten note found on his body. Investigators quickly built a strong case against her due to the extensive evidence uncovered. They found 9 $1 bills on Gumpenberger, which Pam had planted. A 10th bill was later located in her dresser, and its serial number matched 3 of the $100 bills also found on Gumpenberger. Pam Hupp was arrested on August 23, 2016, and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she requested to use the restroom on the day of her arrest, she attempted to commit suicide by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she did not succeed. On January 30, 2017, she appeared in court for the first time. The prosecutor, Phil Groen, argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. A grand jury convicted her of all charges. In December 2016, her bail was set at $2 million. Pam's trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to pursue the death penalty. The prosecutor's reasoning was that Pam had seemingly chosen her victim, Gumpenberger, at random. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, which allowed her to plead guilty while maintaining her innocence. This move nullified the death penalty charge and led to a jury trial being canceled. As a result, Pam was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. Following her sentencing, she called her then-husband Mark Hupp and explained that she had confessed to killing Louis Gumpenberger to avoid putting their family through a lengthy and distressing trial. During the trial, disturbing facts about Pam's past came to light, shocking the police, judges, and the public. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Faria could be presented in court. This ruling led to the reopening of the Betsy Faria case. Betsy, born Elizabeth Faria, worked with Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator and lived in Troy, Missouri with her husband Russ Faria and 2 daughters from a previous relationship. Betsy was diagnosed with cancer in 2010. In October 2011, she discovered that the cancer had spread to her liver and she only had a few months left to live. Sadly, she passed away on December 22, 2011. Before her death, Betsy changed the beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy from her husband to Pam Hupp, without informing her husband or daughters. Pam claimed that Betsy had instructed her to set up a trust fund for her daughters, but later alleged that Betsy wanted her to keep the money because they had a romantic relationship. Betsy's daughters took Pam to court in 2014, trying to reclaim their mother's life insurance fund. However, their case was dismissed in 2016. In the same year, Russ, Betsy's husband, sued State Farm. On December 27, 2011, just 5 days after making Pam the beneficiary of her life insurance policy, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Siteman Cancer Center. Weakened from the treatment, she went to her mother's house, where it was agreed that Russ would pick her up or she would stay overnight. However, Pam unexpectedly showed up and insisted on driving Betsy home, claiming to have dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter reported that her mother didn't answer her call at around 7:21 p.m. Later, at 9:40 p.m., Russ, Betsy's husband, desperately called 911 to report that his wife had taken her own life. However, Russ had been at his friend Michael Corbin's house watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterward, he drove to Arby's in St. Louis before returning home. When the emergency responders arrived about 10 minutes after Russ' call, they quickly realized that Betsy's death was not a suicide. Her body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a deep cut on her wrist. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no blood stains or footprints around the entrance of the house. The investigation determined that Betsy died between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Suspicion immediately fell on Russ Faria, who became the prime suspect. The authorities believed he had a motive, as his wife had refused to give him access to $150,000. Russ was arrested and charged with his wife's murder, while the real killer remained at large. Russ Faria was arrested the day after Betsy's death. He became the prime suspect due to his 911 call, in which he claimed her death was a suicide. However, a glance at the body immediately ruled out this possibility. Additionally, a pair of blood-stained slippers were discovered in his closet, incriminating evidence against him. Russ was subsequently charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action in court in January 2012, just a day after his wife's funeral. The investigation revealed more damning evidence against Russ. He performed poorly on a polygraph test, leading police to regard his behavior as suspicious and erratic. Furthermore, at Pam's request, the police searched Betsy's laptop and found a disturbing Word document in which she expressed her fear of losing her life at the hands of her husband. Russ was held on a $250,000 bail, which he couldn't afford, so he was kept in county jail until his trial on November 18, 2013. During police questioning, Pam revealed that Russ had a history of violence, heavy drinking, and had previously threatened Betsy, making it easy to suspect him of the murder. The prosecution argued that Russ had a strong motive to kill his wife. She had received a large sum of $150,000 for her friend, bypassing him in the process. According to Judge Christina Menem, this motive was enough to implicate Russ. At the trial, Russ' lawyer, Joel Schwartz, defended his client's innocence. Schwartz claimed that Russ had spent most of the night with friends, who corroborated his alibi. Additionally, Russ had purchased food at a store that evening, which made it physically impossible for him to stab his wife 55 times within the given time frame. Furthermore, there were no blood stains on his clothes or body. The prosecutor countered that Russ' friends might have been involved in the crime and had lied about his whereabouts that night. The prosecutor suggested that Russ' friends had accompanied him to buy food at Arby's and stage an alibi. The presiding judge, Christina Menem, refused to allow Joel Schwartz to present crucial evidence that implicated Pam as an alternative suspect. This evidence included phone records showing Pam was still near Betsy's apartment 30 minutes after she claimed to have left, as well as the fact that Betsy had made Pam the beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy just 5 days before her death. Despite Pam having a clear motive, the judge chose to ignore it. In a closed hearing, Pam claimed to have put $100,000 of the insurance money into a trust fund for Betsy's daughters. However, in a later civil deposition, she admitted to keeping the money for herself, stating that she didn't want her daughters, mother, or sisters to have it. Meanwhile, Detective Mike Merkel of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office reported that a crime scene camera had malfunctioned, resulting in important photographs being unable to be developed. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Russ was convicted of first-degree murder and armed criminal action in November 2013. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for 30 years. Before Faria's second trial, Attorney Schwartz finally obtained the photos that showed no blood trail. Fox 2 News was present in the courtroom when Schwartz dramatically revealed that he had uncovered evidence that police and prosecutors had been hiding. After this, Russ was transferred to the Jefferson City Correctional Center, a welcome development for Pam's sister Betsy. During the trial, Russ' wife testified that he had once pressed a pillow against her face, whispering, "This is what it feels like to die," because she had removed him from her insurance policy. Schwartz pointed out that this story originally came from Pam, but the judge ignored this. Throughout the trial, Russ's friends were falsely accused of being accessories to murder, thanks to the prosecutor's closing speech. Fortunately, no charges were brought against them, even though Russ spent nearly 4 years in prison. In February 2015, attorney Joel Schwartz appealed Russ' conviction. However, back in 2013, Judge Christina Menem had already rejected Schwartz's request to review the case. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch revisited the case, uncovering some suspicious facts about Betsy's death and her true killer. Their investigation found that Pam Hupp had given contradictory statements to the police, including a false claim that she had left the Faria residence immediately after dropping Betsy off. The Faria murder case was marred by controversy and deceit. A police officer recalled being shocked that nobody suspected Pam, with everyone focusing on Russ instead. A 911 operator testified that Russ seemed genuinely shocked and agitated during their call. However, 2 jurors revealed that crucial information had been withheld from them, raising questions about why the sheriff's department would deliberately hide evidence that favored Russ. The media uncovered a disturbing web of relationships between the prosecuting attorney, Leah Askey, and key figures in the case, including the captain of investigations and a lead investigator. This information led to Russ' retrial in February 2015. The Missouri Court of Appeal transferred the case back to the 45th Circuit Court, where a new judge, Stephen R., took over. He granted a new bench trial due to new evidence and released Russ on bond pending the trial. During the retrial, Russ was allowed to present incriminating evidence against Pam. Some police officers admitted that Pam had told them she saw Russ with another man in a car while she was dropping off Betsy. The CSI agent who handled the crime scene believed that Russ's bloodstained slippers were a setup and that the bloodstain was not from stepping in blood. Russ was acquitted of all charges and released on November 7, 2015. He later filed a lawsuit against Leah Askey and 3 deputy sheriffs for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating evidence. In 2020, he was awarded a $2 million settlement. The case also led to repercussions for the officials involved. Leah Askey faced a bar complaint, although it was rejected. She later announced that she was willing to cooperate with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Lincoln County Commissioner to review her conduct. Judge Christina Menem was suspended for misconduct in a different case and was voted out of office in 2018 for her role in the Faria murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed a new attorney, Mike Wood, who reopened the Betsy Faria murder case. He confessed that the wrongful conviction of Russ had inspired him to take the job. Pam was eventually interrogated as a suspect in the murder and was charged with first-degree murder. The new prosecutor would sought the death penalty due to the heinousness of the crime. Betsy Faria was brutally murdered, stabbed 55 times, and her wrist was almost completely severed. Prosecutor Mike would condemn the act as animalistic and charged Pam Hupp with the crime. Wood had strong evidence against Pam, including a $150,000 life insurance policy that named her as the beneficiary just days before Betsy's death. Pam had promised to put the money in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter, but instead kept it for herself, claiming that Betsy had wanted her to have it. In an interview, Pam claimed that she and Betsy were lovers, but Wood believed she was lying. Pam had also loaned her son $120,000 from her company in 2021, contradicting her earlier claims. Wood was convinced that Pam murdered Betsy by stabbing her with a kitchen knife while she slept on the sofa. He believed Pam tried to make it look like a domestic violence incident by walking around the room with socks on. The evidence against Pam included a text message she sent to Betsy's phone at 7:20 p.m. claiming she was home, but her call records showed she was still at the Faria residence. The fact that Betsy was found lying on her side suggested to Wood that she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty to the crime, but her trial was delayed multiple times due to her attorney's death and other issues. Finally, in 2023, the trial was scheduled to start in 2025. Wood was not only determined to bring Pam to justice, but also criticized the Lincoln County prosecutors for mismanaging the case and showing bias against Russ Faria, Betsy's husband. He pointed out a 2015 destruction order that could have led to the destruction of evidence, which would have made it impossible for Russ to be released from prison. Christopher Wilder was born on March 13, 1945 in Sydney, Australia. He was the oldest of 4 sons to an American father, Coley Chapman Wilder, a naval officer, and an Australian mother, June Wilder. His life began with a dramatic twist. During his birth, he turned in such a way that his neck got tangled in the umbilical cord. He was stuck and began to suffocate, with his heartbeat becoming barely noticeable. Any attempt to pull him out only made the situation worse. At that time, cesarean sections weren't commonly performed. Seeing their efforts failing, the doctors decided to call the hospital priest to administer the last rites. Miraculously, as they prayed for him, his vital signs completely stabilized. This early brush with death left his parents deeply traumatized, leading them to be extremely overprotective. Despite their vigilant care, it wasn't long before another frightening incident occurred. One summer afternoon, while the family was enjoying their pool, 2-year-old Christopher dove into the water right under his Uncle John's watchful eye. He was underwater just long enough to lose consciousness. Fortunately, his father, skilled in emergency response, quickly applied resuscitation techniques. After a few tense minutes, Christopher was revived. The incident led to many health problems for Christopher during his early years, including seizures. This also affected him psychologically, making him feel fragile compared to other kids. From a young age, Christopher's father instilled military discipline in him with his mother's full blessing. To Christopher, his dad was everything, and his greatest wish was to grow up to be strong like him, leaving behind the frail and sickly image that marked his childhood. Christopher's teenage years were stable. He enjoyed a privileged life, was educated in top schools, and had a family that was always ready to do everything for him. However, this wasn't enough to satisfy him. Puberty increased his desire to be a powerful person. He longed to influence and dominate others, so his behavior became rebellious. In the evenings, he would sneak out of his house with the intention of lurking around. When he spotted girls walking by themselves, he would quietly follow them to their homes and then watch them through the windows as they changed clothes. Satisfying her sexual appetite was her only desire. The proximity of his home to the sea made the beach his favorite place to spend his afternoons. Like any Australian boy, surfing became one of his favorite pastimes, and it made him gain muscle. No longer an insecure boy, the transformation allowed him to become confident and attractive to young girls. But not because he wanted to date them, his intentions were darker. In the summer of 1963, a few months before his 17th birthday, he and his friends were enjoying another afternoon of surfing and beers when they decided to walk the beach in search of girls. They spotted a 13-year-old girl sunbathing. They offered her a few drinks, and Christopher began making advances towards her. She felt uneasy and tried to leave, but he grabbed her arm, led her behind a dune, and abused her while his friends watched without intervening. He left her there and walked away as if nothing had happened. The girl reported the incident, and Christopher, a known figure in the area, was soon arrested. He pleaded guilty, but his parents interceded on his behalf, claiming that he was a bright young man with a promising future that would be ruined in prison. The court took these arguments into consideration and granted him probation with a series of precautionary measures. One of the steps taken was for him to undergo psychiatric treatment involving electroconvulsive therapy. This involved administering short bursts of electric shocks to the brain with intensities varying from 75 to 470 volts. The purpose was to treat what was described as a damaged mind. In truth, his condition didn't improve. Instead, his disturbing fantasies only grew. Around the same time, Christopher became fixated on a book called The Collector by John Fowles. The story follows a solitary entomologist who collects butterflies and becomes obsessed with a beautiful art student. This chilling narrative appeared to inspire him deeply. The therapist who treated him during this time knew he was fascinated by this book, which he had nearly memorized. For him, it represented the ultimate fantasy of having complete power over another person. On a warm day in January 1965, two 15-year-old girls, Mary and Schmidt and Christine Scherzrick, went with their younger siblings to Wanda Beach, an ideal spot for surfing. That afternoon, the wind was too strong for a peaceful stroll, so the group decided to take shelter in the dunes. Mary told her younger siblings that she and Christine would go fetch their backpacks from the rocky area at the south end of the beach, and then they'd return to head home together. Hours passed and the girls never showed up. The next morning, their lifeless bodies were discovered in the sand. Christine had been stabbed 14 times, and Marianne's throat was deeply slashed. Their undergarments were completely torn, a clear indication of an attempted rape. The brutality of the crime shocked Sydney and became front-page news in both local and international media. Over 7,000 people were investigated, and Christopher was a key suspect since his physical description and psychological profile matched that of the perpetrator. Despite these coincidences, there was no evidence to charge him, and his DNA did not match the sample the police had from the assailant. By early 1967, it seemed like the turmoil in Christopher's life was behind him. While out for a walk in Sydney's Palm Beach, he met Christine Pollock. They connected instantly and quickly became friends. Their bond deepened, blossoming into a romantic relationship. He loved taking her to the best surfing spots and driving around the city together. To fully win her heart, he often asked Christine to also invite her younger sister, who was 15. After a month of dating, Christine began to feel uneasy, especially because he often looked at her younger sister in a peculiar way. Alarm bells rang when what seemed like a latent violent streak became glaringly apparent during a dinner at his parents' house. That day, without any apparent reason, Christopher suddenly became enraged and punched out a dining room window. Despite this disturbing event, their love overcame the turmoil, and the couple got married after a year. From day one, Christopher gave free rein to all his sexual fantasies, and if his wife refused, he would beat her until she agreed. More than sexual intercourse, those intimate encounters were rape. The hell was short. Just a week after the marriage, the wife found underwear and pornographic photos of young girls in her husband's car. She decided to end the relationship and, accompanied by her mother, went to the police and accused him of sexual abuse and physical violence. She also told them of her suspicion that he might be the killer of the teenage girls in Wanda Beach. Once the report was made, the police began their investigation. Christopher knew he was under scrutiny and could be arrested at any moment, but as usual, luck was on his side. There was no solid case against him. However, the warning prompted him to distance himself from the situation, and with his father's help, he emigrated to the United States. By early 1969, he had settled in Boynton Beach, Florida. He adapted easily and found his calling as an electrical contractor and construction engineer. The real estate boom at the time quickly made him a lot of money, and he became even wealthier when he ventured into the real estate business. With his newfound wealth, Christopher bought a luxurious bachelor pad. He had two public passions: photography and competing in amateur car races. He bought several high-end cameras and set up a photo studio in his condominium. This hobby soon became a ploy to seduce beautiful young women. Using his charisma and approachable appearance, he posed as a talent scout for famous magazines, thereby attracting vulnerable victims to fulfill his sexual perversions. Christopher spent considerable time roaming the beaches of South Florida, looking for women until one day he was arrested in Pompano Beach for demanding that two girls pose nude for him. The police detained him, but not for long. He only had to pay a hefty fine to be released. 3 years later, while at a shopping mall, he posed as a photographer and convinced the schoolgirl to allow him to take pictures of her for a prominent magazine of the time. Upon arriving at his van, he drugged her and forced her to have sex with him inside the vehicle. The girl fled and filed a complaint with the police. He was arrested again, but managed to negotiate the charges, claiming that his mind shut down on weekends. As a result, he was granted probation with a therapy regimen. Despite his ongoing criminal record, Christopher had managed to evade any formal charges until the mid-1980s, when he persuaded a teenager to get into his car for a photo shoot in a rural location. There, he committed a horrific sexual assault. Arrested and taken to court, he quickly pleaded guilty, but manipulated the jury into believing he would seek immediate psychiatric care, resulting in a verdict in his favor. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation with the condition of attending therapy sessions during that period. At this time, Christopher was seeking a genuine and deep relationship. It was then that he met Elizabeth Kenyon, a 19-year-old who had recently been an Orange Bowl princess and a finalist in Miss Florida. Their relationship was brief. He quickly proposed marriage, but she declined, citing the age difference as too significant, though they remained on good terms. It had been more than 10 years since he last saw his parents, and using this as a reason, he persuaded the court to allow him to travel to Australia. Once permission was granted, he returned to Sydney in 1982. It didn't take long for him to resume his previous modus operandi. He took with him his cameras and a bunch of cards with a false name to pose as a model photographer. One afternoon, he was able to trick two girls under the usual pretext and drove them to an isolated area of the beach where he forced them to undress and pose suggestive poses. Seeing the fear in the teenage girls, he put them in his car and drove them to his hotel. While there, he threatened to beat them. He tied them up, abused them for hours, and then released them. But he was arrested and charged with kidnapping and sexual assault. The case went to an initial detention hearing in a local magistrate's court. The accused didn't seem worried about the charges and claimed that it had all been a misunderstanding. His parents paid a substantial amount of $400,000 for his bail, and he was allowed to return to Florida to handle business matters. Christopher promised to return for the hearing scheduled for April 1984. This situation put him at a crossroads. He was unable to control his impulses, was about to be tried in Australia, and was already known in the United States. He couldn't risk being charged again. The only solution he could think of was a dark one: ensure his victims could not live to tell their stories. Back in Florida, he resumed his passion for cars. And on February 26, 1984, he participated in the Miami Grand Prix with his Porsche. There, he approached Rosario Gonzalez, who was working as a product promoter. Rosario shared her aspirations to be a model and her recent participation in Miss Florida. He persuaded her to have a quick meeting in a nearby cafe. To arrange a photo shoot for her portfolio, she agreed, and at noon, they were seen leaving the location in his car. Rosario lived with her parents, who knew she was supposed to return home between 5 and 6 p.m. When she was going to be late, she always notified them. For this reason, and because she did not make any contact, her parents quickly filed a missing person report. Witnesses confirmed that the young woman had left the racetrack between noon and 1 p.m. with a Caucasian man around 30 years old. Rosario's car was found parked near a shopping plaza, but there were no traces of her. The Miami Herald published a profile of the suspect. By then, Elizabeth, his former girlfriend, had become a teacher for children with special needs. On March 5, 1984, in the late afternoon after finishing her workday, she headed to the gym as was her routine. After leaving the building, she exchanged a few words with the security guard and then walked away in her Chrysler. She made a brief stop at her usual gas station and, by chance, ran into Christopher. He wasted no time in asking if she wanted to model for him in a session, and she happily agreed. So they continued their journey together. That night, Elizabeth hadn't returned to her apartment, but her roommate wasn't worried, assuming she was visiting her parents in Pompano Beach, Florida, about 50 miles away. The next day, when Elizabeth didn't show up for work, her family, knowing it was out of character for her to leave without notice, decided to report her missing. Frustrated with the slow pace of the police investigation, her parents hired a private investigator. With his expertise, he quickly linked Elizabeth's case to that of the young woman who disappeared during the Miami Grand Prix. He also recognized similarities between the ex-boyfriend and the suspect described in the press. The detective visited Christopher's residence, but when questioned, Christopher claimed he hadn't spoken to Elizabeth for over a month and had no idea where she could be. As soon as the detective left, Christopher destroyed all his pornographic material. He then packed his belongings, including his cameras, withdrew $50,000 from his bank accounts, started his car, and headed north towards Georgia, resigned to the fact that his capture was imminent. After driving for 2 hours to northern Florida, he stopped at the first shopping center he found on the evening of March 19th. With camera in hand and his fake business cards, he approached a 21-year-old woman named Teresa and Ferguson, who was shopping. He offered her a modeling job, and his words swayed her. He led her to his car and opened the trunk to show her the equipment to convince her of the job's legitimacy. However, when she was momentarily distracted, he grabbed her by the hair and forced her into the trunk. He drove to a marshy area in northern Florida. Ensuring they were alone, he opened the trunk, dragged Teresa out, and strangled her. Without hesitation, he placed her body on the marsh's edge to conceal the heinous crime. In his frantic journey, Christopher made his way to Tallahassee, the capital of Florida, about 4 hours away. His first stop was Governor Square Mall. In his usual manner, he approached college student Linda Grover, complimented her beauty, and filled her head with fantasies of being on the cover of Vogue if she agreed to work with him. Initially, she refused, but eventually his persistence led her to agree to see the cameras in his car. When he opened the trunk, he pulled out a blanket, restrained her with it, and forced her into the car. He fled the scene, crossing into Bainbridge, Georgia. There, he dragged Linda to a cheap motel where he raped her and subjected her to various tortures. After 2 hours of this nightmare, while he slept, Linda managed to sneak to the bathroom and started screaming. He grabbed all her belongings and escaped. Linda was rescued and identified her attacker from photographs shown by the police. Meanwhile, Christopher fled the state. He drove all night, covering a 9-hour journey to Beaumont, Texas, where he took a break in the parking lot of Lamar University. There, he noticed a nursing student named Terry Walden. Despite deploying his usual charm, she flatly rejected him. On March 23rd, he returned to the mall and was again met with rejections, leaving him deeply frustrated and considering leaving empty-handed. However, he then saw Terry again. Thinking she might have changed her mind, he approached and insisted once more, but her response was the same as before. Enraged by her rejection, he followed her unnoticed to the parking lot. As she opened the door of her car, he suddenly appeared and pushed her inside. Driven by his anger, he took her to a secluded spot where he stabbed her 43 times in the chest, then dumped her body in a nearby canal. He fled in her car. During the search for the nursing student, Texas authorities found Christopher's car abandoned in the mall parking lot. There, they discovered hair samples belonging to Teresa, confirming his responsibility for her death on Merritt Island. By March 25th, Christopher was in Oklahoma, hunting for another victim at the local Penn Square Mall. There, he met a 21-year-old woman who dreamed of becoming a model. His tactic worked better than ever. It was not difficult to convince her to come to his car under the pretense of conducting a photo session for $100. He drove 180 miles north to Newton, Kansas, checked into room 30 of a motel, and abused her until dawn. After breakfast, with absolute coldness, he drove his victim 90 miles northeast of Newton near Junction City, Kansas, where he stabbed her to death and dumped her body near Milford Reservoir. By March 29th, Christopher was in Colorado, continuing his spree. This time, he was at Grand Junction. He started looking for a specific type, a girl with a cowgirl look. He found his target in 19-year-old Cheryl Lynn Bonaventura. Well-dressed and polite, he introduced himself as a modeling agent, and she was thrilled with the proposal as it was her dream. Naively, she voluntarily got into his car, agreeing to the plan to leave the city. Along the way, they stopped at a restaurant in Silverton where, in front of the staff, they pretended to be a married couple heading to Las Vegas. They arrived the next morning at the Four Corners Monument, where the states of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. They took a photo at the iconic spot and continued their journey to Page, Arizona, near the Utah border. There, Christopher booked a room under the same pretense of being a married couple. On March 31st, Cheryl's family reported her missing to the police, though they hoped it was just a misunderstanding or an act of rebellion due to her age. Unfortunately, that morning, Cheryl and Christopher's journey took them to the Kanab River in Utah, a remote area with deserts, mountains, and cliffs. As they silently admired the scenery, Christopher unexpectedly stabbed his victim and then shot her, leaving her lifeless. He abandoned her body in a desert area. Christopher's journey continued to Las Vegas, Nevada. His plan was to attend a modeling event, which for him was a paradise filled with naive girls eager to succeed in the tough world of flashes and glamour. Camera in hand, he arrived and sat in the front row to scout his potential victims. At the end of the day, after talking with several teenagers, he focused his attention on 17-year-old Michelle Lynn Korfman. She had driven over 25 miles from her home in Boulder City, Nevada. Nervous about participating in her first casting, she had asked her family and friends to let her go alone. They talked, and Christopher filled her with compliments. Subsequently, Michelle changed her clothes and left the mall in his company. It was April 1st. As soon as Las Vegas authorities alerted the FBI about the disappearance of the young woman at the modeling event, the agents reacted swiftly, requesting all photographs taken during the evening. A photographer promptly handed over 5 rolls of film. After developing them, they could see Michelle walking the runway, with Christopher intently focusing on her. Meanwhile, like the others before her, Michelle suffered violence and torture at his hands. Her body was left at a rest stop in Southern California. On April 4th, Christopher reached the opposite coast of the United States in Torrance, California. There, he went to a shopping mall where he saw a girl filling out a job application. She was Tina Marie Rizzico, 16 years old. He offered her the usual plan and the same $100, much more than she would earn as a store employee. The young girl was hesitant but excused herself, saying she needed to get home. Her rejection did not sit well with him. He pointed a gun at her and demanded she get into his car without making any noise. Frightened, she complied and then sat in silence for 2 hours while he drove to San Diego. Once in the city, Christopher rented a room and unleashed his usual barrage of abuses against the girl. During a break, he turned on the TV and was shocked to see a special bulletin announcing him as a new addition to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list, specifically linking him to the disappearance and murder of several young women. He was dubbed the Beauty Queen Killer. In a turn of events, he chose not to kill Tina, but instead coerced her into becoming his accomplice to lure more victims. In exchange for her cooperation, he promised to release her in the next city. Terrified, she agreed. He started driving back east and arrived in Merrillville, Indiana on April 10th. There, Tina kept her word. At the South Lake Mall, she convinced 16-year-old Donette Sue Wilt to join them, assuring the young girl that another woman's presence meant safety. In the parking lot, Christopher pulled out a gun and forced Donette into the car. Once at a nearby hotel, Tina witnessed him attacking Donette for 2 consecutive days. Christopher kept the TV on and saw another FBI bulletin, this time Tina's mother pleading for her daughter's life. Panicked, he ordered the girls to grab their belongings and get into the car immediately. He then drove non-stop to the border of New York. Considering it too risky to travel with both, he left his car in a wooded area of Pena. While Tina stayed in the car under threat of death if she left, he took Donette into the small forest. Suddenly, he began to strangle her. She fought back fiercely, but he pulled out a knife and stabbed her twice in the chest. Thinking her dead, he walked away. Fortunately, Donette was still alive. With great effort, she managed to drag herself to the side of the road. A truck driver took her to the hospital in Pagnan, where they managed to save her life. Hours later, she was able to report what had happened to the county sheriff. She detailed her attacker and the young woman accompanying him. She described the vehicle they were traveling in and their intended escape destination, Canada. This triggered a police operation to capture the fugitive. Christopher drove to Victor, New York, just 50 minutes from where he had abandoned Donette. He parked at the Eastview Mall, exited the car violently with a gun in hand, and kidnapped Beth Elaine Dodge, a 33-year-old woman who was passing time while waiting for her daughter to come out of daycare. He forced her into his vehicle and commanded Tina to drive Beth's car. After a short drive to the outskirts of the city, he stopped next to an abandoned gravel quarry. He pointed the gun at Beth, led her to a densely wooded area, and shot her in the back. Then he made Tina transfer all belongings from the other car to the stolen one. In his way, Christopher reassured Tina that he would not harm her and chose to drive to Logan Airport in Boston. There, he bought her a ticket back to California and set her free. While in Boston, he headed north to Beverly, Massachusetts, attempting to kidnap 19-year-old Carol, who he assaulted suddenly on the street. However, he was unsuccessful as she managed to escape screaming for help. Descriptions of both the vehicle and the suspect were circulated among patrol officers, making it only a matter of hours before the serial killer would be caught. On the afternoon of April 13th, needing directions to Canada, he stopped at a gas station in Colebrook, New Hampshire. However, 2 state troopers recognized him and approached. At that moment, Christopher reached for the gun in the car, threatened the officers, and a struggle ensued with one of them. Suddenly, the revolver went off twice. One bullet seriously injured the officer, while the other struck the killer directly in the heart. Christopher died instantly. Throughout his spree across the United States, he kidnapped, tortured, raped, and murdered 8 young women. But it is believed there were more victims. Christopher Wilder was cremated in Florida, leaving behind a personal fortune of over $7 million. In June 1986, a court-appointed arbitrator ruled that this money should be divided among the families of his victims. There were numerous missed opportunities to stop Christopher's spree of violence, which escalated into serial killings. However, his parents helped him evade punishment. Jurors were swayed by his false promises of seeking psychiatric help, and the victims were left at the mercy of his twisted mind and horrific fantasies. Anna Alexeyeva Repkina, a charming and outgoing woman from Chelyabinsk, Russia, hailed from a good family. With a strong work ethic, passion for travel, rock music, and cats, she owned several. Anna was a vibrant individual. She loved capturing life's precious moments through photography and valued romantic relationships deeply. Her ultimate goal was to find true love, settle down, have children, and build a happy family. Anna's remarkable sense of humor made her a delight to be around, something her friends and acquaintances often highlighted. However, her life took a dramatic turn in 2016, when her high school sweetheart of 7 years ended their relationship, leaving her devastated. Despite this heartbreak, Anna refused to give up on her dreams. She took the initiative to try online dating, determined to find her ideal partner. On a Russian dating site, she came across a promising match who seemed to possess all the qualities she was looking for. Anna met a charming young man named William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. What drew her to him was his fascination with Russian culture, but more importantly, his adoration for her. William consistently showed kindness to Anna, often complimenting her and making an effort to be present for her whenever she needed him. Despite the physical distance between them, Those who knew him described William as a charismatic and passionate person with a great sense of humor who inspired those around him to chase their dreams. As they developed their online relationship over several months, their bond grew stronger. They seemed perfectly suited for each other, sharing similar tastes in music and a love for live performances, as well as a similar sense of humor. Friends who knew them noted that Anna and William complemented each other beautifully. William's caring nature was evident in his thoughtful gestures, such as sending Anna flowers despite being separated by oceans. Anna and William's online chemistry was undeniable, but they wanted to confirm their connection in person. So in December 2016, they decided to take their relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to spend the Christmas holidays with William. However, she initially made a mistake and booked a ticket to Portland, Maine instead of Portland, Oregon. Before realizing the error, she had already flown to Maine, but she was determined to make it work. After fixing her flight issues, Anna finally arrived in Oregon. William picked her up from the airport and they spent the next 10 days together. He took her on sightseeing trips, and they enjoyed activities like visiting the seaside, playing in the snow, and cuddling by the fire. William also introduced her to his friends, and they celebrated New Year's Eve together, sharing a romantic kiss at midnight. It was the perfect Christmas experience for Anna. After a whirlwind 10-day visit, William popped the question to Anna using his grandmother's emerald ring, and she happily accepted. However, what Anna didn't know was that William was leading a double life. During their time together, he had also been secretly seeing his 33-year-old landlady, Michelle Chavez, behind her back. William rented a room in Michelle's house, and it seemed he also held a special place in her heart. Michelle was married with 2 children, but this didn't deter her romantic involvement with William. Their affair had been ongoing for over a year when Anna, William's girlfriend, visited Michelle's home. Unbeknownst to Anna, she was meeting her rival, as Michelle was her boyfriend's landlady. Michelle showed understanding when William brought Anna to her home, perhaps thinking William would never leave her or believing Anna was insignificant, much like her own husband. Whatever the reason, Michelle didn't expose their secret. It wasn't until Michelle discovered the engagement ring that her husband's stance on the situation became clear to everyone involved. Meanwhile, Anna returned to Russia, unaware of the drama she had left behind. After posting a photo of her engagement ring on Facebook, the social media algorithm brought the post to Michelle's attention. Michelle's anger wasn't solely due to William's engagement to another woman. Michelle planned to leave her husband to be with William and, as a symbol of her commitment, took off her wedding ring and gave it to him. However, she soon discovered that the ring was identical to the engagement ring William had given to Anna. It turned out that William had given Anna Michelle's own wedding ring, which had been recycled. Michelle confronted William about this, and he tried to calm her down, insisting that Anna meant nothing to him and promising to break off their engagement on March 1st, 2017. Meanwhile, Anna had packed her bags, including her wedding dress, and had quit her job, ready to start a new life with William in another part of the world. Michelle was unhappy about this development. Anna's mother, Yelena, also had reservations about her daughter's hasty decision. She was unsure about William, whom Anna barely knew, and thought she was rushing into things. Anna, however, was convinced that she was in love and saw no reason to wait. Yelena finally released Michelle from her grasp. Michelle, realizing Anna's visit was not a social call, grew angry. She demanded that William find another place to live, refusing to let the engaged couple stay under her roof. William complied, renting an apartment for himself and Anna. However, he continued to secretly see Michelle, sneaking out to visit her and reassuring her of his commitment to her, downplaying Anna's importance. Michelle became increasingly worried about William's growing relationship with Anna, so she took action. She contacted Anna on Facebook, revealing everything about her and William's ongoing affair. Anna reported the conversation to William, but he dismissed it as Michelle's jealousy. Anna believed him, and the couple decided to ignore Michelle's warnings and focus on their future together. They set a wedding date for March 23rd and planned a beachside ceremony. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, and they headed to the beach. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home. They planned to try to get married again in April. On that same day, surveillance footage captured the couple buying food at a McDonald's drive-thru. Anna sat in the passenger seat, still wearing her wedding dress. William had told her that the officiant was sick. That was a lie. Despite claiming he didn't love Anna, William had kept her convinced that he wasn't invested in their relationship. However, had grown tired of William's manipulation. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum: choose between her and Anna. Michelle made it clear that if Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action, build a snowman, a sinister phrase meaning to kill someone, and hide their body in a snowy area where it would never be found. After issuing her threat, Michelle lost contact with William and assumed he had chosen Anna over her. She left him voicemails to express her feelings. On Sunday, April 16th, William phoned Michelle to share the news that he was single again, having just ended his tumultuous relationship with Anna, who was now headed back to Russia. Coincidentally, William had hit a deer with his car and was waiting at the Ailey Martile store for repairs. He asked Michelle to meet him there. As it was Easter Sunday, Michelle was attending a family gathering, but she excused herself to join William. When she arrived, they reconnected by having an intimate moment in William's car, reaffirming their strong connection. On April 17th, Anna's body was discovered in the forest. Initially, investigators didn't know her identity, as there was no identification found with her body, and she had only been in the state for about a month. The crime scene lacked a murder weapon, but was littered with trash. However, amidst the debris, a clear plastic bag caught their attention. Inside, they found a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken paper bag. The KFC receipt turned out to be the crucial clue in solving the case. It contained a date, time, and debit card number, which led investigators to Kevin Thomas. When questioned, Kevin revealed that he was best friends with William and had been getting to know Anna. He also shared a tradition with William, where they would eat lunch at KFC every Friday. The receipt, it turned out, was from a purchase made about a week before Kevin's questioning. The investigation into Anna's death led to the discovery of William's deceitful behavior. In his interview, Kevin revealed that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to clear his head. However, William never returned the weapon. The police began to suspect William and Michelle after hearing Kevin's following Anna's death. William's behavior became increasingly unusual and suspicious. He withdrew money from Anna's bank account to pay off his debts, and was caught on camera buying cigars and Star Wars Legos at various stores. William also confided in Kevin that he was spending money recklessly to cope with his emotions. Furthermore, he began researching time travel and even reached out to strangers on WhatsApp, offering to exchange his soul for the opportunity to go back in time. William wanted to travel back in time to April 16th to prevent a situation caused by his best friend's mistake. However, on that day, William was seen crying in a store employee's arms, claiming his girlfriend had just broken up with him. He had moved back in with Michelle, but was picked up by the police and questioned. The police asked William about his whereabouts on April 16th, and he said he was on a drive with Michelle. When asked about Anna, he denied having a romantic relationship with her, saying they had only gone on 2 dates, and he had ended things. According to William, their last interaction was in mid-March, when Anna mistakenly posted their engagement on Facebook, causing trouble with Michelle. When questioned about the trash found near his late fiancée or the woman he dated, William admitted to littering, but claimed it was just KFC trash and a can from the general store, not related to Anna's death. About 40 miles separated the ALP general store from the logging road. However, the investigators did not believe William's alibi. Lieutenant Chris Duffett, one of the investigators, quickly increased the pressure by revealing that William's trash had been discovered near a murder victim at a different location. Initially, William reacted with surprise and heartbreak, feigning disbelief that he was being questioned about a murder. 2 days after Anna Rapina's body was found, her fiancé William Hargrove was arrested for her murder on April 19th. During the investigation, was also questioned about her whereabouts on April 16th, the day Anna was killed. At first, Michelle stuck to a rehearsed alibi, claiming she and William had spent the day together, with William picking her up from her mother's house and going on a drive. However, Michelle later changed her story, admitting she had lied initially. She then claimed that she and William had planned to meet up, but he never called or showed up. When the police revealed that William was in custody for murder, Michelle's response was surprisingly calm, saying only, "Okay." The investigator pressed Michelle on her lack of emotion, which eventually broke down, and she tearfully attributed her initial calm to being in shock. William Hargrove was indicted on charges of murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft in June 2018. His trial began in October 2019, with the prosecution seeking the maximum penalties for each charge, while the defense argued for a more lenient sentence. William's defenders claimed he was innocent and that Melissa, the spurned lover, was the true culprit. However, the prosecution presented a strong case against William, backed by evidence and motive. The evidence showed that William was torn between 2 lovers, with Anna pressuring him to make a choice. There were records of William and Anna driving together in an alone car. On the day of Anna's murder, William's cell phone was tracked to the logging road at 4:30 p.m. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with his fingerprints being the only ones on the weapon. Despite denying any involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to go shopping and pay off his car insurance. He was even filmed withdrawing cash from an ATM using her card. The prosecution argued that William had driven Anna to the forest, gotten her out of the car, and then executed her with his shotgun. The prosecution claimed that William was faced with a choice between Anna and Michelle, leading to his actions. In contrast, the defense argued that their client was innocent. According to the prosecution, the evidence pointed to Melissa as the perpetrator. A threat from Melissa to build a snowman with Anna, her cell phone found near the logging road, and Anna's cell phone discovered in Melissa's house suggested that Melissa had planned the crime. Melissa, who was not charged with any crimes, testified as a witness for the prosecution. She revealed that she worked as a late-night cab driver and was married to an Oregon State University instructor, but their marriage was loveless and open. She met William at a bar where he worked and, with her husband's permission, began a romantic relationship with him. As they grew closer, William rented a room in her house. When Anna entered the picture, Melissa was not threatened, having a similar open relationship with William. Melissa explained that by her second visit, she couldn't tolerate the situation anymore, especially when she saw her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although she had given William an ultimatum, she had no role in William's actions that hurt Anna. Melissa clarified that she never intended for Anna to get hurt or killed. She denied the defense's allegations, stating that the threat about building a snowman was just a joke, a lighthearted family comment, even if it was a bit extreme. She acknowledged that her cell phone was found in the forest, but William was the one who drove her there. She didn't know why or what he planned. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned. As his partner, she naturally held onto it for him. Melissa's testimony lasted 14 hours, and she was not the only one. Around 70 other people testified, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, some of Melissa's family members, and others. Throughout the case, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, particularly in her hometown in Oregon, where she was criticized and ostracized by the locals. Michelle had reached a low point and attempted suicide, but fortunately it was unsuccessful. The prosecutor praised Michelle's efforts to take responsibility, calling her actions tough and super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver their verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours and returned with a decision. Despite the defense's efforts, they couldn't find Michelle guilty of Anna's death. There was no physical evidence linking Michelle to the crime scene or the weapon used. In fact, she had a solid alibi. She was celebrating Easter at her mother's house, and multiple witnesses could vouch for her presence. On the other hand, William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence against him led to his conviction on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Anna's attorney announced plans to appeal the verdict. Notably, the jurors developed a strong connection with each other during the trial. After the trial, they visited the logging trail, where Anna's life was tragically cut short, to pay their respects to her memory. Anna will be remembered as a courageous young woman who left her home in Russia to build a new life in the United States. Anna was a loving person who openly shared her love with others. She was cherished by many during her lifetime, and her memory will continue to be loved and honored. The prosecutor, Amy Matsuko, stated, Cody Johnson was born on a sunny day, April 8, 1989, in the bustling city of San Jose, California. He had a close bond with his mother, Sherry Johnson, which defined much of his early life. In 2002, they packed up and moved to Kalispell, a charming little tourist spot nestled in the scenic Flathead Valley of northwestern Montana. This town lies cozily between a shimmering lake also named Flathead and the majestic peaks of Glacier National Park. Cody was a true adventurer at heart, spending his days exploring the wild, vast outdoors, sometimes cruising down long, winding trails with his buddies. It was during these youthful escapades that he kindled a deep, enduring passion for cars, a hobby that soon turned into much more. Those who knew Cody described him as the real deal, charismatic, warm-hearted, and always ready to lend a hand. He was the kind of friend who didn't think twice about going out of his way for someone he cared about. As he grew older, Cody turned his childhood car obsession into a flourishing career. He started small, tweaking and enhancing cars for racing during his teen years. Over time, this hobby evolved into a full-blown business dealing with commercial vehicles. Aside from his automotive pursuits, Cody also worked at Nomad Communications, where he teamed up with his uncle and a crew of car enthusiast friends. It was a bonus that his childhood best friend, Cameron Fredrickson, was also his boss, making work feel a lot like hanging out with friends. Life was almost perfect for Cody. The only thing he felt he was missing was someone special to share it with. At the age of 23, he was ready to settle down. He often talked about finding a church girl to marry. And then on Halloween 2011, he met Jordan Lynn Graham. Jordan was born in August 1991 and had spent her entire life in Kalispell. Raised in a deeply religious family, her life revolved around her faith. She was a regular at Faith Baptist Church, where she helped care for children and supported local families. Jordan dreamed of one day being a stay-at-home mom, raising a family in the faith that meant so much to her. When Jordan and Cody met, there was an instant connection, although Jordan was quite shy initially. As they chatted, she shared her dreams of family life and her love for the outdoors. Cody was smitten. Jordan found him intriguing too, but at 20, she wasn't quite ready to jump into a serious relationship. They went on a few dates and decided to remain friends for now. Everything took a new turn when Cody decided to win Jordan's heart for good. He started by joining her church, First Baptist, and began mingling in the same social circles she did. This marked the beginning of a transformation from their casual friendship to a more serious relationship, at least from Cody's perspective. By November 2011, they were officially a couple, and Cody was completely smitten with Jordan. He was so in love that he wanted to spend every possible moment with her. His mother, Sherry, remarked that just a few weeks into their dating, Cody was already sure he wanted to marry Jordan, even after she expressed her wish to remain chaste until marriage. His feelings remained unchanged. However, those who knew them both could sense that Jordan's feelings weren't as intense as Cody's. Some thought her reserved nature might be the reason, but others suspected the relationship was somewhat unbalanced. They rarely showed affection in public, holding hands or flirting, which raised eyebrows among their friends. Despite the doubts, Jordan accepted Cody's marriage proposal in December 2012, which surprised many of her friends who felt she wasn't quite ready for marriage. Yet, they were happy for her when she excitedly announced her engagement on Instagram, calling it the best early Christmas present ever. The wedding was set for June 29, 2013, and planning began in earnest with both Cody and Jordan's best friend, Kimberly, playing significant roles. Jordan, in particular, threw herself into the preparations and even performed a song at the wedding written by a professional songwriter. The lyrics of the song would later seem eerily foreboding. As the wedding day approached, Jordan's apprehensions grew. She repeatedly questioned her decision to marry Cody, confiding in Kimberly whether she was making the right choice. On the day of the wedding, her anxiety was palpable. She seemed reluctant to make eye contact with Cody, her gaze often directed downward, revealing the turmoil she felt about the step they were about to take. After the wedding ceremony, Jordan managed to put on a brave face for the wedding photos and even seemed genuinely present during their first dance. It looked like she was finally warming up to the moment, focusing all her attention on Cody. But this apparent happiness was short-lived. The very next day, from their honeymoon hotel, Jordan sent a distressed text to her friend. She confessed that she had not consummated the marriage and had rebuffed Cody each night. She expressed dread over the expectations of intimacy, texting, "I just know he's going to want to do stuff and I'm not really wanting to." In another message, she hinted at using excuses about her period to avoid intimacy. Fearing the consequences if forced into a situation she was uncomfortable with, Jordan's deep-rooted fear of intimacy stemmed partly from her religious beliefs and partly from her unresolved feelings towards Cody. She was terrified at the thought of being physically close to him. The tension in their relationship escalated until July 7th, a week after their wedding. Although Cody was supposed to spend the day golfing with friends, he canceled to spend time with Jordan, which included church and some quiet time by the lake. Later, they joined friends for dinner at a local Dairy Queen. That evening, after returning home with Jordan, Cody vanished. His absence was first noticed the next day by his close friend and co-worker, Cameron, who found it unusual for Cody, a punctual and dependable employee, to not show up for work. Concerned, Cameron went to the new house Cody had recently purchased with Jordan. After repeatedly knocking with no response, he let himself in, but found the house empty and unsettlingly quiet. His concern turned to alarm when he discovered Cody's phone in the garage, an unusual oversight for someone who always carried it with him. This was a clear red flag for Cameron, indicating that something serious might have happened. Cameron's frantic calls to friends and family confirmed that no one had seen Cody since the dinner at Dairy Queen around 8:30 p.m. the previous night. The mystery of Cody's whereabouts deepened, and the worry among his friends and family grew. Cameron rushed to the police station to report Cody missing, and the seriousness of his concern prompted the authorities to act immediately. One of the first police officers to interview Cameron found it odd that Cody's boss reported him missing, not his wife, Jordan. Later that day, Kimberly, a close friend of the couple, managed to reach Jordan to ask about Cody's disappearance. Jordan explained that after they had left the restaurant, Cody received a phone call that seemed to upset him. She said she gave him space to cool off. Later, when she went to the garage to fetch her phone charger from their car, she saw him leaving with some friends in a black car. She recounted receiving a text from Cody saying he was going out for a ride with some visiting friends. When questioned by the police, Jordan reiterated her story and added that she didn't recognize the men with Cody. She insisted they hadn't argued that night and suggested Cody was likely out having fun with his friends. She defended her decision not to report him missing immediately, explaining she didn't want to cause unnecessary alarm if he was just out for a few hours. However, 48 hours after Cody's disappearance, tension rose during a gathering at the family home. Friends and family were baffled by Cody's uncharacteristic behavior, disappearing without telling anyone where he was going, particularly so soon after his wedding. Despite the growing doubts, Jordan maintained her story. The atmosphere grew more strained, and during an intense discussion, Jordan became so agitated that she threw her wedding ring across the room. While some saw this as a strange way to cope, Kimberly sensed something more troubling. Kimberly called her friend to discuss her suspicions after leaving the gathering. The next day, the police called Jordan in for further questioning due to the inconsistencies in her accounts. The situation intensified as they tried to piece together Cody's whereabouts and understand the events leading up to his mysterious disappearance. The investigation into Cody's disappearance intensified when the detective confronted Jordan about inconsistencies in her story. The detective had spoken to several people and stressed the importance of Jordan being truthful, hinting that there was likely more to her story than she was admitting. Meanwhile, Cody's mother brought the police his phone records from the day he vanished, hoping they might reveal something about his last known activities. One of the calls was to a friend about returning a borrowed tool, but this lead quickly fizzled out. The friend had an alibi. His wife was in labor at the time of Cody's disappearance, clearing him of any suspicion. With no new leads and their options running thin, the police's focus returned to Jordan, whose account was becoming increasingly dubious. On July 10th, Graham reported to police that she had received a suspicious email from an account named CarmenTony607 confirming her husband's death. The email read, "My name is Tony. There is no bother looking for Cody anymore. He is gone. I saw your post on Twitter and thought I would email you. He had come with some buddies and met up with me on Sunday night in Columbia Falls. He was saying he needed to be with his buddies for a bit and take them for a joyride. 3 of the guys came back saying that they had gone for a ride in the woods somewhere and Cody got out of the car and went for a little hike and they are positive he fell and he is dead, Jordan. I don't know who the guys were, but they took off. So call off the missing persons report. Cody is gone for sure. Tony." Jordan showed this message to one of her friends, displaying no emotion as she explained that according to the email, Cody had accidentally fallen off a cliff in Glacier National Park while with friends. The friend, who was horrified by the message and the lack of reaction from Jordan, urged her to take the email to the police immediately. She was shaken, frantically pushing Jordan to act, exasperated by her passive demeanor. Despite Jordan eventually going to the police with the email, it didn't provide the closure they hoped for. Instead, the mysterious message only deepened the investigators' suspicions, driving them to probe even further into the puzzling circumstances surrounding Cody's disappearance. One of the detectives found the timing and content of the email too convenient, but what troubled him even more was Jordan's unemotional reaction to the news of her husband's presumed death. Despite the dubious email, Jordan organized a trip to Glacier National Park with her friends and family to look for Cody. Hannah, one of the friends on the trip, noted Jordan's oddly cheerful demeanor during the drive, describing her as carefree, even sticking her hand out of the window as they drove. Their initial search yielded no results, but on the second day, Jordan insisted on leading the group to a specific overlook despite alternative suggestions. She claimed to have a strong feeling about this particular location. Once there, they parked at the top of a loop trail known for its steep ascent to a 200-foot cliff that towers over a deep ravine. With a sureness that seemed rehearsed, Jordan quickly made her way to the edge of the cliff, peering intently into the ravine below. She casually tossed a rock down and speculated, "I think he's down there." Her emotionless demeanor at such a dramatic moment raised eyebrows. It required the daring efforts of an FBI agent who secured himself to a tree to lean over the precipice, along with the assistance of multiple emergency service teams and a helicopter, to finally locate and retrieve a body at the bottom of the ravine. The body was identified as Cody Johnson, a beloved local businessman and car enthusiast. The idea that Cody could have accidentally ventured into such a dangerous area seemed implausible. The coroner later confirmed that the injuries sustained were consistent with a fall, noting significant damage to Cody's head and arms. While Cody's friends and family were overwhelmed with grief, Jordan appeared to be relieved by the discovery. This only fueled suspicions, as now the police's investigation might be curtailed with the recovery of the body. However, the identity of the person behind the email remained a mystery. Jordan suggested the police look into Tony, a car enthusiast and friend of Cody, who hadn't seen him in months. Tony, concerned for Cody, allowed the police full access to his accounts, but they found no trace of the email address in question. With no further leads from Jordan and Cody's phone records, the police decided to investigate the IP address associated with the email. As they awaited this crucial information, the police deepened their inquiries among Cody's social circle. It was during these discussions that Kimberly revealed insights into Jordan's state of mind before the wedding. She recounted how Jordan had repeatedly questioned her decision to marry Cody, expressing dread about the physical aspects of marriage and regretting her decision entirely. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the ongoing investigation, highlighting potential motives and state of mind that could be crucial in unraveling the truth behind Cody's tragic fate. Just 2 days before Cody vanished, Jordan expressed her unhappiness in a message to her friend Kim saying, "I should be happy, but I'm not. If I tell him, it's going to break his heart." She also disclosed a troubling incident where Cody had physically intimidated her, which added to her distress. On July 7th, further messages revealed that Jordan was apprehensive about discussing her feelings with Cody, fearing his reaction. After their conversation that day, which escalated into a heated argument, Jordan left home to give Cody time to cool off. This decision marked a significant turning point. The police's suspicion towards Jordan intensified when they learned about these events. Soon after, the information from the email, which had misleadingly declared Cody dead, was sent from a computer at Jordan's stepfather's house. Interviews with her family suggested Jordan could be behind this email, although this alone wasn't conclusive proof. The breakthrough came when the investigation revealed that both Cody and Jordan's cell phones had pinged towers near Glacier National Park on the night Cody was last seen, despite Jordan's claims that she wasn't with him. Surveillance footage also confirmed their presence together at the park entrance at 9:17 p.m., further contradicting her statements. Faced with mounting evidence, police brought Jordan in for questioning again on July 18, 2013. Confronted with the evidence, Jordan broke down and recounted the events of July 8th. She admitted that after confessing her true feelings about their marriage, they had argued fiercely. In a moment of high tension and emotional turmoil, they went to Glacier National Park, where, according to Jordan, during an argument near a cliff, she pushed Cody, resulting in his fatal fall. She explained her actions by saying the emotional pressure and anger in that moment overwhelmed her, leading to the tragic outcome. Jordan's emotional turmoil was evident in her statement to the police, describing how she felt overwhelmed by every emotion imaginable in that tragic moment. Detectives tried to piece together the scattered details of her confession, including a mysterious scarf found at the scene, which she mentioned in an offhand comment about a blindfold. Jordan insisted that Cody's death was an accident, vehemently denying any premeditation or intent to harm him. She explained that in a moment of intense emotion and panic, she pushed Cody from the cliff when he turned his back to her, facing the precipice. Further complicating her story, Jordan admitted to creating the email at her stepfather's house and using it to send misleading messages about Cody's fate. Despite her confession, Jordan walked out of the police station without immediate charges, a decision that puzzled many. It wasn't until July 22nd at Cody's funeral that public perception shifted dramatically against her. Jordan was seen texting during the service, an act viewed by attendees as a profound disrespect during such a solemn occasion. This behavior fueled rumors that she had engineered Cody's death as a desperate escape from an unhappy marriage, avoiding the stigma of divorce in her community. The community's whispers about her motives and the lack of grief displayed at the funeral led to a growing belief that Jordan might never have truly loved Cody. Subsequently, she was charged with first and second-degree murder, along with making false statements. The severity of the situation escalated when the jury, considering the evidence in her actions, added a charge of premeditated first-degree murder. Jordan's trial commenced on December 9, 2013, with the prosecution aggressively pursuing the case against her. As the trial unfolded, the evidence stacked up, and Jordan's prospects looked increasingly grim, painting a bleak picture of her future. During the trial, prosecutors meticulously dissected Jordan's narrative, challenging her credibility by highlighting her inconsistencies and questioning her claim of innocence and remorse. The testimonies from Cody's family and friends were particularly damaging. They depicted Jordan as distant and indifferent, suggesting she killed Cody to avoid intimacy with him. Her defense team initially attempted to argue self-defense, but seeing the challenging odds, Jordan opted for a plea deal. She agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a 30-year sentence without parole, avoiding a first-degree murder charge that could lead to harsher penalties. However, upon learning that the prosecution still intended to pursue a charge of premeditated first-degree murder, which could extend her sentence to 50 years, Jordan attempted to retract her plea. This decision fell to a district judge who had to determine whether to accept her retraction or proceed with sentencing under the agreed plea. On December 13, 2013, Jordan Lynn Graham was sentenced to 30 years and 5 months in prison with an additional fine of over $16,000 in restitution to Cody's family. During her sentencing hearing, Jordan took the stand to apologize, explaining that her actions were a result of shock and panic, claiming she hadn't been fully aware of their precarious location when she pushed Cody. Over the following years, Jordan made several attempts to have her sentence reduced, appealing on various grounds, but none of her appeals led to a case review or reopening. The federal prosecutors were firm in their intent to use her case as a stern warning about the severe consequences of committing a crime under federal jurisdiction. Ultimately, Jordan's sentence meant she would not be eligible for release until she was over 52 years old, firmly underscoring the gravity of her actions and the justice system's commitment to upholding severe penalties for serious crimes. Quandyke Bishimbayev was born on April 11, 1980 in Gil, Kazakh SSR. Quandyke Bishimbayev grew up with his younger sister, Arugian, born in 1984. He received 3 higher educations, studying at Kazakh Academy of Management, Taz University, and George Washington University through a presidential scholarship. At 26, he defended his PhD thesis in economic sciences. Quandyke began his career as a bank manager in 2000. He briefly interned at the Ministry of Economy, then held senior positions in large companies before returning to the ministry in 2016. He became the young head of the ministry but was dismissed 8 months later due to a bribery scandal, sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, he was released on parole after just 1 year. In his personal life, Quandyke was married twice. His first wife, whom he married in 1999 and had a son in 2000. They divorced in 2004. In 2006, he married, with whom he had 3 children before divorcing in 2020. After a few years, he married Sultanat Nakhnova. Sultanat Nakhnova was born on May 15, 1992 in Pavlodar, Kazakhstan. She was the youngest of 2 children to businessman father and economist mother. Her uncle was a prominent politician. As a schoolgirl, Sultanat became interested in astrology, studying literature, and making accurate predictions for friends and classmates. She turned her hobby into a career, achieving success quickly. Sultanat promoted her astrological services on social media, offering consultations, forecasts, and guidance on goal achievement, career choice, and spiritual growth. She also gave advice on love affairs and relationships with a client base consisting only of women and girls. She quickly achieved financial independence by doing what she loved. Her services were in high demand, with consultations scheduled months in advance. She had gained a large following on social media and was living her dream life. In spring 2022, Quandyke stumbled upon Sultanat's page on a popular social network. He liked Sultanat and decided to contact her for an astrological consultation, but she turned him down, saying she only served women. This rejection only fueled his interest, and the politician persistently tried to get her attention, showering her with compliments, convinced that only she could help him as a trusted specialist. Sultanat was flattered but refused to meet Quandyke, who repeatedly asked her out despite Sultanat offering online consultations. He persisted for months, gathering information about her life, habits, and interests, but she remained uninterested. Sultanat initially refused to meet the man, but eventually agreed to a meeting for face-to-face counseling. Despite his good impression, polite behavior, and courtesy, she told her brother that he was not her type and they wouldn't match. Initially, Sultanat was not worried about Quandyke because she knew she could keep him. However, within a month, the situation changed when Quandyke gained influence by befriending a respected older member of the family, Sultanat's grandmother. Quandyke asked to speak to Sultanat's grandmother, asking for her support in case Sultanat changed her mind about marrying him. This gesture touched Sultanat, but she still refused to pursue a relationship with him. Sultanat visited her parents in Pavlodar in fall 2022 and mentioned no serious changes in her personal life were expected. She confided in her brother that the 12-year age difference with Quandyke confused her and she wasn't attracted to him, also citing astrological incompatibility. Sultanat's brother was shocked to see a post on his social media that his sister had accepted Quandyke's marriage proposal just a month after their visit. This news surprised both her family and friends, as she had recently said that nothing serious would happen. A few months later, in December 2022, they held a luxury wedding at a budget establishment in Astana. The marriage was not officially registered, with they opting for a mosque ceremony instead. Sultanat's attitude towards her partner changed significantly after the wedding. She praised his intelligence, education, and conversation skills to friends, and denied his involvement in a corruption case that led to his brief imprisonment, claiming he was framed. From the outside, they seemed happy. He showered her with gifts, and she called him the perfect husband. Friends envied their relationship, thinking she was lucky. However, this didn't last. After the wedding, they moved into his parents' house, where his mother, Almira, spoiled her with gifts and protected her from household chores, but couldn't shield her from her son's true nature. Sultanat would periodically visit her parents with her husband, but she wouldn't invite them to her home because it would annoy Quandic and cause arguments. At first, none of her relatives were aware of this. However, less than a month after the wedding, on New Year's Eve, Sultanat's brother visited and witnessed a disturbing scene. A large, festive table had been set, but the celebration was only for the immediate family. When Quandic's cousin and his wife arrived with gifts for everyone, Sultanat was embarrassed because she didn't have a gift in return. She quickly found a solution by giving Quandic's cousin's wife a bottle of expensive perfume that her husband had bought her the day before, but she hadn't had a chance to open it yet. Quandic was not just displeased, but enraged by her actions. He yelled at her, claiming she had no right to give away something he had paid for, and began insulting her. The guests quickly left, and when her parents tried to intervene, they were rudely shut down. In a fit of rage, Quandic overturned the table, spilling food and drinks everywhere and ruining the New Year's Eve celebration. Sultanat's brother was shocked by the scene and didn't know how to react. The next day, Sultanat confided in him over the phone that her husband's behavior had changed dramatically since their wedding, and she was unsure of the reason, but hoped the situation would improve with time. Sultanat Nukanova's brother advised her to end the relationship and return home, but she flatly refused. 2 months later, she sent him selfies showing severe bruises on her face, asking him not to ask any questions. Concerned, her brother tried to contact her, but she didn't answer his calls. He then reached out to her husband, Quandic, who agreed to meet with him. During their meeting, Quandic told Sultanat's brother to stay out of their business and refused to explain the cause of the bruises on his wife's face. Quandic was also unable to account for Sultanat's whereabouts, which filled him with uneasy thoughts. Fortunately, Sultanat was eventually found at her parents' country home. Despite the pleas of loved ones, Sultanat returned to her husband, insisting that she loved him and was willing to do anything to save their marriage. For a while, he behaved impeccably, showering her with gifts and promising to change for her sake. They even took a vacation together to a popular resort in the Maldives, where they appeared to be very happy. Sultanat didn't explicitly complain about her marriage, but her behavior and appearance changed. She lost weight, became withdrawn, and wore revealing clothing, possibly to hide bruises. She stopped working as an astrologer and blogger and only posted happy photos with her husband on social media. Quandic took away her source of income, making her reliant on him. She was not allowed to socialize without his permission and was monitored at all times. Despite appearing perfect to outsiders, their relationship was actually controlling and suffocating. Lieutenant confessed to her friend that her husband exerted total control over her, forbidding her to work or contact her parents without his knowledge, and was irrationally jealous, accusatory, and abusive. Despite her friend's horror and advice to leave him, she insisted she just wanted to talk, not be advised. They sought help from a family psychologist to save their marriage. Sultanat's husband rejected her therapist options and instead chose his own specialist, who blamed Sultanat for all their problems. She suspected her husband had hired the therapist to humiliate her. In summer 2023, Sultanat tried to leave him and stay with her parents, but her husband appeared a week later, asking for another chance and suggesting a change of environment to save their marriage. Sultanat hoped having a child would change her husband's attitude, but she couldn't get pregnant. After a family dinner in October, She briefly left her husband and moved into a rented apartment found by her brother. However, she returned to her husband 10 days later and even remarried him in a mosque ceremony, which she personally told her family about. On November 5th, she invited her family and close friends to her cousin's restaurant. Klondike made a good impression with his chivalrous behavior, being attentive and affectionate towards her. Everyone believed his feelings were genuine, but tragedy was looming. On November 9th, a relative contacted Sultanat's brother over the phone, sounding frightened as she asked about the truth of a social media rumor. After clarification, she shared a news link which reported that a former economy minister had taken the life of his young wife. Sultanat had asked to stay with him for a night after threatening to leave her husband. He agreed and told her where to find the spare keys, but she never arrived and her phone stopped working. He rushed to her house, but found no one there and her husband was not answering his phone, which made things even more concerning. The decision was made to immediately go to the family restaurant, where Sultanat was last in contact, to search for answers. While on the way, he received a call from his frightened parents, who had also read the news and were trying to find out what had really happened. However, he couldn't provide them with any information and only promised to look into it. When he arrived at the restaurant, he was met by police officers who expressed their condolences and informed him that his sister had sadly passed away before receiving medical attention. Overwhelmed and disbelieving, he struggled to accept the news, but tragically, it was confirmed to be true. By the time he arrived, the main suspect, Klondike, had already been arrested and taken to the station. Klondike denied any guilt, claiming that the event was a terrible accident and that he was trying to help his wife. Also, the restaurant owner was taken into custody on suspicion of being involved in the incident. Several months ago, on the evening of November 8, 2023, Sultanat and Klondike and their friends attended a concert by singer Dima Bilan. The loud music made it difficult for their friends to follow the conversation between the spouses, who got into a heated argument. Initially, their friends thought they were just discussing something, but it soon became clear that they was engaged in a full-blown fight. They stormed out of the concert hall without saying a word to anyone and went to the restaurant Bao, where they continued to quarrel in a private VIP booth. Camera footage shows Klondike taking several bottles of alcohol from the bar and joining his wife in the booth. As they drank wine and discussed their relationship, she told him that she couldn't continue like this and planned to leave him. Infuriated by her statement, Klondike started shouting and threatening her, even slapping Sultanat. After the altercation, she called her brother and told him she would be coming to his house for the night, having finally made up her mind to leave her husband. Around midnight, she stepped outside, intending to go to her brother's house, but her husband caught up with her and the argument continued. The surveillance footage reveals a 15-minute argument between them, after which Klondike convinced his spouse to re-enter the building. They continued to quarrel in the vestibule and eventually secluded themselves in a stall with no camera coverage, making it impossible to determine exactly what occurred inside. In the hallway, cameras recorded Klondike aggressively pursuing his wife, Sultanat, as she attempted to create distance. He grabbed her hands, shook her and pushed her against the wall. Klondike's lawyer downplayed these actions, describing them as stroking. However, Sultanat tried to escape and locked herself in the toilet to evade her husband's aggression. Undeterred, he kicked the door, resulting in corresponding injuries. After forcing his wife to open the door, Klondike physically assaulted her, striking her multiple times in the face. He berated her, claiming that she lived at his expense. The events that followed are unclear, but Klondike alleged that his wife had an angry outburst and, in a fit of rage, removed all her clothes and jewelry, flushing them down the toilet to demonstrate her independence from him. According to another account, Klondike allegedly forced his wife to undress, intending to humiliate her further after the gold jewelry was lost down the drain. This led to Klondike becoming enraged, punching his wife in the face multiple times and then pushing her with such force that she fell and hit the toilet. However, during the trial, Klondike claimed that his wife was intoxicated and had fallen several times while undressing, hitting her head on the tiles and plumbing fixtures. Klondike and his wife had planned to go home after leaving the restaurant, but he refused to drive due to his intoxication. He was ashamed of his drunken wife, who was wearing only underwear under her coat and didn't want to call a cab. They decided to return to their VIP booth instead. However, when Sultanat stopped to look at her reflection in the mirror, her husband forcefully pushed her towards the exit. This quickly escalated into a brutal assault as he mercilessly beat her with his hands and feet and dragged her by the hair. At around 7 o'clock in the morning, he dragged her back to the VIP cabin where he continued his attack. Klondike ultimately caused severe harm to Sultanat, but during the trial, he claimed he had no involvement in her injuries. According to him, she had fallen and hit the floor and furniture on her own and then fell asleep on the sofa. He alleged that he noticed a bruise on her face, but rather than seeking medical attention, he consulted a fortune teller to determine if everything was all right with his wife. The fortune teller told Klondike his wife was drunk and needed sleep, so he calmed down and didn't touch her. Later, he realized she wasn't breathing and called his brother, Bakhan Banav, also the restaurant owner. Together, they deleted CCTV footage, claiming it showed his wife's indecent behavior. Banav called an ambulance in the evening, but she had already died. He claimed to have tried CPR, but it was too late. Both brothers were arrested by law enforcers. Klondike's former wife, Nazim, was also under scrutiny several years ago when her then-husband was arrested on corruption charges. She defended him at the time, but soon after his release, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and claiming she had outgrown the marriage. However, after her ex-husband was accused of brutally murdering his new girlfriend, Nazim gave a candid interview admitting that she believes him to be capable of such a crime. She explained that her 14-year marriage to Klondike changed dramatically in 2011 after the birth of their second child. Klondike became increasingly aggressive, selfish, and narcissistic, thinking that the world should revolve around him. Nazim also revealed that her husband frequently cheated on her, openly flaunting his infidelities. However, it wasn't until his phone data was accessed during his 2017 arrest that she discovered the full extent of his cheating. He had multiple mistresses, and they constantly changed. After Klondike was released from prison, his behavior became even more violent and aggressive, according to Nazim. A disagreement erupted between them a month later, sparked by a minor issue. However, Klondike's reaction was excessive as he became enraged and ripped a toilet lid from the wall with his bare hands, throwing it at Nazim. Although she dodged, the incident made her realize that the marriage was unsalvageable in her opinion. Klondike had apparently restrained his true nature for a long time because he knew Nazim wouldn't tolerate his darker impulses. Klondike had a sinister strategy. He initially chose a victim, tested her limits, and pushed her to see how much she would tolerate. Once he was convinced that she wouldn't leave or complain, he revealed his true self as a sophisticated sadist. The trial of Klondike began in March 2024, with relatives of Sultanat pushing for an open trial to prevent him from using his wealth and connections to influence witnesses and judges. Klondike, who had previously been convicted of a serious offense but released on parole, requested a jury trial to avoid a life sentence. A jury of 12 was selected, and in this case, a life sentence would require a unanimous decision from all jurors and the judge, a very unlikely outcome. Klondike denies premeditated murder, claiming the event was an accident. He says his spouse provoked him, but video recordings contradict him. Initially, authorities considered charging him with domestic violence, a crime with lenient punishment in Kazakhstan. However, this sparked outrage, particularly from the victim's mother, who feels her son-in-law may get off too lightly, undermining her faith in justice. A law was approved in April 2024 to toughen penalties for domestic violence in Kazakhstan following public outrage. Klondike tried to pressure his brother into giving false testimony and also attempted to discredit his late wife in court, calling her an inadequate, unbalanced, and alcoholic who provoked him. He claimed he acted in a state of passion, hitting her only a few times, and that her other injuries were self-inflicted from falling under the influence of alcohol. However, Klondike was alleged that he didn't allow called medics for Sultanat and was instead concerned with deleting footage from cameras. Klondike ordered his brother to fake his wife's phone activity, making it seem like she was home. However, the plan didn't work. Klondike was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 24 years. Klondike's brother Bakan Banoff was given a 4-year sentence for complicity. Sultanat's family expressed dissatisfaction with the court's decision. Her father hoped for a life sentence for his former son-in-law, calling any other verdict unfair. Margaret Ann and Chad Robert Amato got married in the mid-1980s. Margaret, who was 2 years older than Chad, already had a 3-year-old son named Jason from her previous marriage. Chad didn't mind that Margaret had a son and was eager to treat Jason as his own. In 1988, they had their first child together, a son named Cody, and a year later, on May 20th, 1989, they welcomed another son, Grant. The 3 brothers grew up very close to each other. They rarely heard no as an answer, but knew they had to follow strict family rules, do well in school, help out at home, and behave well to earn privileges. They worked hard to make their parents proud and to be a strong support for them. Both Margaret and Chad had advanced degrees in healthcare. Margaret worked as a senior operational manager at a top private clinic, and Chad, who started as a clinical pharmacist, later moved into software specialization. The family was well off, living in a large house in the suburbs with a stable where they bred racehorses as a hobby. After high school, Jason moved out to attend college and eventually started his own family in another state. He stayed close to his parents and brothers despite the distance. And Grant were especially close, doing many activities together like attending the same school, playing on the same sports teams, and going to the shooting range with their dad on weekends. Their father owned a notable collection of firearms, which he kept secure. Grant, being the youngest, often got extra attention and care, especially since he was a frail and sickly child. He grew up shy and reserved, finding it difficult to make friends outside his family. His brothers were his closest companions, particularly Cody after Jason moved away. Both Cody and Grant attended the University of Central Florida, where they attended nursing school together and then proceeded to pursue further studies to become nurse anesthetists. Cody was at the top of his class, while Grant struggled and barely passed. However, they both secured jobs in their field. Cody was known as a dependable professional, but Grant often made mistakes at work and needed his tasks double-checked. In the summer of 2018, Grant's career faced a major setback when he was caught stealing powerful sedatives from the hospital. These drugs, used rarely and under strict conditions for causing euphoria and hallucinations, led to his arrest after the theft was discovered. During the police interrogation, Grant admitted to taking the drugs, saying he used them on patients who were not adequately medicated in his view. Some suspected that he might have been using or selling the drugs, but there was no conclusive evidence to prove this. Grant was quickly suspended and then terminated from his job. The theft charges he faced were dropped, apparently because his parents stepped in to help. After losing his job, Grant, who was already somewhat of a recluse at 29, retreated even further into isolation. He spent most of his time inside, often on his computer, and his internet activity was primarily focused on adult websites. Grant struggled with social interactions, especially with women, which left him feeling inadequate. To cope, he spent a lot of time chatting with webcam models on various websites, trying to fill the emptiness of his solitary life. Unfortunately, this habit was expensive, and Grant funded it by taking money from his parents and his older brothers. His dependency on adult content and alcohol became an addiction. Despite this, Grant seemed satisfied with this lifestyle, living off his family's resources and contributing nothing in return. On a platform for private online interactions, Grant met Sylvia Wenceslava, or Sylvie, a stunning and charismatic woman from Bulgaria. Her confidence and charm drew him in. Sylvie made Grant feel loved, desired, and unique. He began to believe that they had a real connection, and that her feelings for him were genuine. Convinced they were in a relationship, Grant was determined to stand out among her admirers. He spent hours and thousands of dollars each day to keep her attention solely on him and lavished her with gifts like expensive lingerie and jewelry, which she wore during their video chats. Eventually, his father had enough and gave him an ultimatum: find a job or leave home and lose financial support. Grant promised to look for work, but he didn't plan to follow through. Instead, he told his parents he wanted to become a video game streamer. His parents, hoping for any positive change, agreed to set up a streaming station for him. However, once he had his privacy, Grant returned to his usual activities, surfing adult-only sites. In August 2018, Cody, Grant's older brother, decided to take a break and travel to Japan for a new experience. He invited Grant and his best friend Jeremy to join him. Cody and Jeremy had saved their own money for the trip, but Grant's part was paid for by their parents. Instead of giving the money directly to Grant, they gave it to Cody, trusting him to handle it responsibly. During the trip, Grant seemed disinterested and detached. He paid little attention to the sights or tours, often glued to his smartphone. He frequently chose to stay in the hotel, using his brother's laptop instead of exploring with the others. One day, while the rest of the group visited a lake near Mount Fuji, Jeremy accidentally left his credit card in their hotel room. Taking advantage of the situation, Grant accessed Jeremy's account and stole thousands of dollars, which he spent on private sessions with his favorite webcam model, Sylvie. Jeremy noticed the theft later, but thought it was a case of fraud. He couldn't figure out who the thief was and continued to investigate after returning home, unaware that Grant was behind it. Desperate to impress Sylvie, Grant lost touch with reality. He made up stories about living alone in a large house, owning a successful business, and having plenty of money to spend on her. He backed these claims with substantial money transfers, ranging from a few $1,000s to as much as $100,000 for her birthday. Grant's extravagant spending eventually caught his parents' attention since he was using their accounts. Initially, he claimed the expenditures were investments in his online streaming project to gain followers, but his parents, Chad and Margaret, soon realized he was lying. A major family argument ensued, leading the family patriarch to demand that Grant leave home. However, his mother and Cody intervened, recognizing Grant's severe internet addiction. The family was shocked to discover that Grant had drained nearly $200,000 from their accounts. A search of his room revealed vials of potent substances, which Grant claimed he used to cope with his struggles. His parents decided to cut off his access to their funds and planned to send him to rehab for drug and internet addiction. Overwhelmed by everything, Grant declared he was done with it all and threatened to end his life. He then fled in his car at high speed. It was later found out that Grant went to his aunt and uncle's house, where he crashed through their fence and hit their garage wall. Understanding the family's distress, his relatives offered him refuge, giving him a place to stay until things calmed down. Grant quickly accepted the offer to stay with his relatives, but the next day he betrayed their kindness by stealing thousands of dollars from their accounts to fund more sessions with Sylvie. When his aunt discovered the theft and informed his parents, they urged her not to involve the police, promising to handle the situation and repay the stolen funds. That very day, Chad went to collect Grant, recognizing the urgent need for intervention. Chad, Margaret, and Cody knew that reasoning with Grant wouldn't work and feared he might commit more thefts if left to his own devices. They gave him a stern choice: either enter a rehab clinic to treat his addictions or face jail time for his thefts. Reluctantly, Grant agreed to the rehabilitation, and he was admitted to the clinic at the end of December 2018. While Grant was in treatment, his parents went through his computer and discovered the depth of his spending. They found Sylvie's profile, the woman who had captivated their son, and uncovered hundreds of videos and messages that Grant had saved, revisiting them frequently. The family contacted Sylvie to explain that Grant was not the successful businessman he had portrayed himself to be, but rather an unemployed man struggling with addictions, and that the money he had sent her was stolen. Sylvie was indifferent to the revelation, viewing her interactions with Grant as just a job, and she expressed no intention of returning the money. On January 5, 2019, Grant unexpectedly returned home, having left the rehab clinic early due to non-compliance, completing less than a quarter of the program. He tearfully promised to change his life and seek employment, but he also threatened to end his life if forced to return to rehab. His parents decided to give him another chance but set strict conditions: no computer use, a tight daily schedule, and close monitoring of any money he made. They even secured him a part-time job at a local grocery warehouse. For the first few weeks, Grant appeared to adhere to these new rules, leading his parents to hope that he had truly changed. However, on January 24, 2019, everything took a turn when Grant convinced his mother, Margaret, to let him use the laptop briefly to check his email and look for a better job. Trusting her son, Margaret agreed, not realizing the mistake she was making. Grant's first action was to try and contact Sylvie, only to find out that his parents had already revealed the truth about his circumstances to her. Grant viewed his parents' actions as a betrayal, feeling deeply humiliated in front of Sylvie, the only woman he believed he loved. He thought they deserved to pay for their actions. Chad kept most of the family's collection of firearms securely locked in a large safe and trusted no one with the key. However, Grant knew about another handgun kept loaded in his parents' bedroom. It was this weapon he chose to use. "We warn you that we are about to show you graphic images of what happened next." His mother was working on the computer in the home office when Grant silently approached her from behind and fatally shot her in the back of the head. The way her body was positioned suggested she had no time to react or understand what was happening. Next, he waited for his father, Chad, who was just returning from work. As Chad walked into the kitchen, he was met by Grant and was shot twice in the chest without a chance to defend himself. With a chilling calm, Grant then concocted an even darker plan. He decided to frame his brother, Cody, who had always supported him and been his closest ally. Cody had since moved out to live with his girlfriend, but Grant lured him back home using his now-deceased father's phone. He sent messages pleading with Cody to come home immediately, claiming something terrible had happened. His plan worked as expected. Cody, concerned, left work early and hurried home. As Cody entered the house and reached the bottom of the stairs, Grant shot him. Cody collapsed, mortally wounded, but not immediately dead. Realizing the grim reality of his situation but unable to alter it. After killing his family, Grant methodically removed his fingerprints from the gun, placed it in Cody's hand to transfer prints, and then left it beside Cody's body to stage the scene as a murder-suicide. Afterwards, Grant calmly packed his belongings, downloaded video files of his interactions with Sylvie, and even messaged her. Once ready, he loaded his car and drove away. On January 25, 2019, a worried man contacted the police in Seminole County, Florida. He was concerned because his friend and co-worker, Cody, a dedicated nurse, had not shown up for his hospital shift, which was completely out of character. Cody had left work slightly early the previous day, hurriedly departing due to urgent family matters, and he even forgot to pick up his paycheck. Cody had not been reachable by phone since then. His girlfriend, who he had recently started living with, mentioned that Cody had gone to his parents' house after a request from his father, but he hadn't come back or made contact. Alarmed by these unusual circumstances, the police were sent to the Amato family's address. The residence, situated in an Orlando suburb, featured a large property complete with a stable and area for walking horses. Cody's car was in the driveway and lights were visible in various parts of the house, suggesting normalcy at first glance. There was no evidence of forced entry. The doors and windows were secure. When deputies arrived and knocked, there was no response and calls to the house's landline were also unanswered. The police obtained permission to enter and managed to unlock the back door with a knife to slide the bolt. Inside, a haunting silence filled the house, yet the lit room suggested someone should be there. The scene they discovered was grim. Chad, the 59-year-old family patriarch, was found dead on the kitchen floor, having suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the chest. Near the main entrance, Cody, age 31, was found curled up at the bottom of the staircase, also dead in a large pool of blood. In the home office, Margaret, 61, appeared as though she might be sleeping with her head on her arm by her computer. But the blood splatter on the monitor and the large stain under her head told a tragic story. Next to Cody's body, the police found a pistol, which forensic analysis later showed had Cody's fingerprints. Initially, it seemed like a horrifying family tragedy where Cody might have killed his parents and then himself, especially since there was no sign of a break-in or any missing items. However, a crucial clue pointed otherwise. Smeared blood on the front door indicated it had been locked from the outside by someone leaving the scene, suggesting that the real perpetrator was not among the deceased. The focus quickly shifted to the family's youngest son, 30-year-old Grant, who had been unaccounted for since the evening of the incident. His car, a white Honda, was missing, as were some personal belongings, including a laptop from his room, indicating he had likely fled. Grant was immediately declared a person of interest, and a search began to locate him. The following day, the police quickly tracked down Grant hiding in a small roadside motel in Orange County. He was arrested without showing surprise, though he appeared disappointed that he was found so quickly. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Grant vehemently denied all charges against him. During his interrogation at the police station, Grant concocted a series of unlikely stories about his father's severe mistreatment towards him, his mother, and his brother. He painted a picture of his father trying to sever his relationship with Sylvie, whom he described as his true and genuine love. When asked about the tragic night of January 24, 2019, Grant's explanations were unclear and inconsistent. He suggested that a violent altercation had erupted between his father and brother. According to Grant, Cody had seized a gun and fatally shot Chad, with their mother Margaret becoming an unintended casualty. Grant maintained that he was not present during the events, claiming he had spent the night in his car after being expelled from the house by his father. He claimed he drove away the next morning, oblivious to the calamity that had occurred. His account was fragmented and lacked credibility, and the evidence increasingly indicated that he was the lone architect of the tragedy. Consequently, Grant was arrested and charged as the principal suspect in the triple homicide of his family. Unable to post the $750,000 bond, Grant remained in jail as his trial began on July 15, 2019. The courtroom heard from numerous witnesses, all of whom spoke unfavorably about Grant. These included his elder brother Jason, other relatives, and Cody's friend Jeremy, whom Grant had previously robbed during their trip to Japan. Witnesses characterized Grant as someone deeply troubled by addictions, dishonesty, and theft. A critical piece of evidence highlighted during the trial was a substantial bank transfer from Chad's account to Grant, executed after all other family members had died. To authorize this transfer, it was revealed that Grant had used his deceased father's fingerprint. The prosecution advocated for the death penalty, arguing the severity and premeditation of Grant's crimes, while his defense pleaded that he was mentally ill and needed psychiatric treatment rather than capital punishment. On August 12, 2019, the verdict was delivered. Grant Amato, age 30, was found guilty of first-degree murder in the deaths of 3 family members, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When asked if he felt remorse, Amato responded with, "My family has been blaming me for months for ruining their lives, stealing and not following the rules of the home, so I might as well be blamed for this too." On December 7, 1985, Armand and Lorraine Peltier led their Siberian husky named Paka outside their home in Frenchville, Maine, right across the river from Canada. At some point in the early morning hours, a woman delivered a full-term baby girl on a gravel pit access road near the intersection of US Route 1 and Peltier Avenue in Frenchville, and then drove or was driven away, leaving the infant behind as temperatures were well below zero. Mr. Peltier said that not long after letting their dog out, she came back and kept pounding at the door's window to get back in. He said he went to go look and could not believe what he saw. He would say he thought it was a rag doll at first, but then he realized it was actually a newborn baby. Mrs. Peltier remembers a cute little girl with reddish blonde hair that they were later told weighed 6 pounds, 8 ounces. The baby had very recently died and still had the umbilical cord attached, although police did not know if the baby was born alive. When authorities arrived on the scene, they found a large amount of blood, placenta, and boot prints. An autopsy was performed and the cause of death was listed as exposure. It was 30 degrees below zero the night before, and officials said she could not have lived more than 30 minutes in that temperature. The Peltiers believed the cries of the infant or its scent led Paka right to her, and said Paka carried her so carefully by her head right to our back steps. In 1985, investigators told the Peltiers that any wounds caused by Paca in no way contributed to the baby's death. Sheriff James Midori said there were some wounds in her head, but they were completely superficial, and he noted the dog did nothing to hurt the little baby. An officer at the scene said a vehicle must have driven in because of the tracks found in the snow. He also said there was frozen blood found in the snow along with footprints, and near those were the dog tracks. He said he turned and followed the dog's tracks right to the house where it had dropped the baby by the door. The gravel pit was not far off the road, and so the baby must have been abandoned in the middle of the night, or as the officer noted, the person would have been in plain view. The vehicle was determined to be small in size, and the mother of the baby was suspected to be from Canada. The media were telling people to be on the lookout for people shopping for items that could be used to control heavy bleeding. Police questioned a couple who had been spotted in a local department store around the time of the incident. The woman reportedly had blood on her pants and was acting distressed. Police immediately released a composite sketch of the couple to the media. The couple were Canadian and came forward and explained that she had gotten her period and were quickly ruled out as the suspects. Other than a description of a small car based on tire tracks found at the scene, police have very little evidence and the trail went cold. The Peltiers said they could never have children and would have loved to adopt the baby Jane Doe if she had survived. They were very saddened that the mother had left the baby in the snow instead of leaving her on their doorstep. The Peltiers moved to Bangor in the summer of 1986, and Paca lived to be 12 years old before dying of cancer in 1987. This baby is known in the Doe Network and Namas as the Rustock County baby Jane Doe, but no composite sketch of the baby exists. The case remains open and is still under investigation, and as of today remains unsolved. Thanks for diving into another mystery with us. If you enjoyed unraveling the clues and chasing the truth, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more thrilling cases and deep dives into the unknown.